Are the markets rational?
No. In the long run, yes. In the short run, no. And it's because markets it's humans. Like, we're buying and selling because of our emotions, which is not why you should ever buy and sell, but that's what we do. And things get out of hand. And markets they're not rational in the short run, and they're not really fair either. When we first talked in 2018 or whenever that was, I remember you asking me, why can't we just set a floor in coffee?
Yeah.
Why can't it just be like a minimum price so that farmers always know they can make this amount of money?
At least this much.
And I'm going to mention in the US, we've kind of done something similar to that. It's not as simple as that, but we've done that in corn. And the unintended consequences have been really catastrophic for society. Commodities aren't fair to anyone. We're either in an oversupply situation and prices are too low and farmers are getting, holding the bag and struggling, or they're too high and it's the buyers and the roasters that are suffering. There's very few times where we're just in a happy medium, which is very unfortunate. But as market participants, we have to kind of learn to try to hopefully manage it, but maybe even take advantage of these types of cycles because we know they're going to come.
Initiating direct trade and making it work at a small or medium-sized scale is hard, especially ahead of harvest. Arkena Coffee Marketplace connects roasters directly with smallholder farmers in Ethiopia and builds in the hard parts: integrated QC, logistics support, and producer-led transparency. Ethiopia's harvest is underway and samples will be ready in February. We know we're early, but that's the point. With coffee supply as volatile as it has been in 2025, getting in now helps you understand timelines and can assist in planning your 2026 buying with confidence, even if you've never bought direct before. The minimum is around 20 bags, and Arkena can pull multiple roasters to meet the MOQ, so you can participate without overcommitting. If you're curious, listen to our recent conversation on the podcast with founder Matthew Thornton, then explore the marketplace via the link in our show notes. You can also book a meeting with Matthew and he'll walk you through requesting samples, the order process, pulled orders, QC, and shipping once coffees are ready. Supporting our advertisers is a great way to support our mission at Map It Forward to build responsible businesses with responsible pricing models. Check the show notes for details and explore Arkena Coffee Marketplace today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 2 of a 5-part series with Carley Garner from Carley Trading. In this series, we're talking about the coffee market in 2025 and 2026. We are not talking about the cash market. We are talking about the futures markets. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what are the different forces that have moved the markets this year. And I guess, Carley, a great place to start that is perhaps let's talk about what's the difference between the cash markets and the futures markets.
Well, the futures markets is the idea of futures markets is it's a centralized place for people to buy and sell coffee or whatever commodity is to accomplish some sort of goal. So if you are a producer, you might buy or sell futures on the futures markets to basically lock in your price. You mostly be selling if you're a producer. You're locking in price, and the idea is you're shifting your price risk to speculators. So, for example, if coffee's at $4 and you feel like this is a price where you can confidently make money and your budget looks great at $4, you can sell a futures contract, lock that price in on 375,000 pounds and basically, go about your day. If the market goes up, you make money in the cash market, so that's okay. That you're losing on your futures. If the market goes down, that's okay too. The cash market is getting weaker for you, but you're making up the difference on the futures side. The idea is you're eliminating or reducing risk. Unfortunately, people use the futures markets to expose themselves to risk, or in the case of producers or end users, a lot of times they opt not to hedge. They opt not to use these tools, these futures or options. We'll talk about those in a minute too, to reduce the risk of their business. Because obviously, if you're a coffee producer and prices go up, things are great. If they go down, you're starting to feel the pain. The reality is in commodities, not just coffee, but all commodities, and it's been since the history of time. they go down more than they go up. When you see commodity prices rally, there's usually some sort of disruption in the system, supply issue, and that's almost always, in fact, yet to date, it's always been temporary. Might be a month, it might be 2 years, but it's always been temporary. But the futures market is basically a mechanism to facilitate buying and selling. If you are a producer, you could, in theory, sell a contract on the exchange and you use that to deliver your coffee to the exchange. Most people don't do that because it's very inconvenient to do that. But technically, that's what it's there for. So in short, brings buyers and sellers together to ideally find a fair price point that both parties can live with. And it never works out that way, but that's really the idea of it. And so, yeah, I hopefully answered your question.
Yeah, you absolutely did. And
Okay.
and
All
in the
right.
next episode, we're going to talk about some of the specifics of those tools that are related to producers and how they can take advantage of those tools. But in the last episode, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I am so sorry. I really should have mentioned this. So the great thing about the futures exchanges, I mentioned they're centralized, but they're standardized. And that's really what the key is. Because they're standardized, each coffee producer or each end user or each participant doesn't have to go out and find a buyer or a seller to match up with. The exchange does it for them, and they can do that because every commodity contract is exactly the same. There's not the qualities of a specific, grade. So there's no negotiating is what I'm saying. It's all standardizing. Nobody cares if they're buying from this person or that person. They're just hitting the buy button and it goes.
A contract is a
simple and
contract.
convenient. Yes, correct.
Okay. Right.
Okay, sorry.
Whereas in the cash market, we're differentiating based on quality, based on origin, based on flavor profile, based on a whole bunch of things. That is not present in the futures market, right? There's no
You are
conversation
absolutely right. Yes, you're absolutely right. And so one thing I would suggest to people, and we're doing this, some of our cattle producers, they're finding they don't really care for what goes on in the futures markets because they believe that their product is superior. So they're going outside of the system and they are, in their opinion, and probably I believe them, creating a superior product that they can, it's not as convenient to sell because they're not just selling it all at once and moving on. They have to find individual buyers, but they can charge a premium for that.
Yeah, and here's where I'm going to give a shameless plug because I just found out before this conversation, in our next monthly discussion group, we're going to be talking about pricing coffee and how people can, it's going to be a 2-hour conversation with, it's somewhere around 35 people now, that it really big thinkers in coffee, that we're going to talk about what are the different mechanisms that we can use in the specialty market that can perhaps create some independence for people to get them away from being hooked into the C market price. And look, guys, we have to come together to figure out these solutions. We're all doing it separate from each other. We've got to come together and stop reinventing the wheel individually. So if you're interested in that, go to our Patreon. It's $20 a month to be a part of this conversation. We've made it that price so that everybody can afford to be able to be a part of it. And it is an incredible group of people and really great discussions. So shameless plug, I know, I'm sorry about that. But
amazing. And
go ahead.
It's really the idea of direct to consumer.
Exactly.
Cutting out the middleman.
Direct trade.
I think we can all agree in our lives, if there is a solution that's convenience, it's someone else is generally making all the money, right? We are accepting convenience because we enjoy the convenience, but we are paying in some other form on the back end. Somebody else is profiting off of our work. So if it's very convenient, it's probably not the best solution for you.
And people say to me, but I need logistics people. You can't get rid of the importer. You can't get rid of the exporter. We don't want you to get rid of the importer and the exporter. They're very valuable in this process. But you can have direct relationships with people where you're using your importer and your exporters as your logistics partners rather than as necessarily the people who do all the buying and the selling and the risk mitigation. You do yourself and your producing partners a service by learning how to use these tools to manage your risk over time. You don't have to learn all of it in 1 year. But I have learnt so much from watching Carley do so much of the trend analysis that she does, and I study it and I try and understand it. And the one thing that I have come to realize is none of us are going to learn this in one go. This is going to be something that we have to learn over a period of time. And if you're just going to turn around and say, well, fuck it, I'm just going to let other people do it for me and I'm just going to try and figure out how to sell the coffee industry is changing so quickly that you're going to have to adapt with it. So, yeah. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling on about that. I'm sorry, Carley.
No, it's great.
So this year, there's been a lot that's happened when we look at tariffs, when we look at what's been going on with regards to the stock market, geopolitics, blah, 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 blah. What have been the forces amongst all of the forces that have really moved the markets this year?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about the money supply. I think that's really a big component, and the speculators jumping on. But I think it's also the tariffs have been, they've added a lot of chaos and uncertainty. And when humans are under a lot of uncertainty, humans don't like uncertainty. None of us do. No. And we tend to overreact, right? And so that overreaction causes volatility in both directions. We've seen it in both directions. It's my understanding that the Brazilian tariffs in the U.S. have basically been eliminated at this point. But everybody in the back of their mind is like, well,
he might wake up tomorrow.
What about next week? So nobody. It seems like things have been fixed, not fixed, but simplified. But they really haven't, because nobody can get comfortable. And we're seeing this not just in coffee. We're seeing it in livestock. There was also Brazilian imports of beef that were coming to the U.S., and that was kind of a contentious point as well. So it's not just coffee. I know you probably aren't following other markets, but it's the same idea. And these tariffs have really caused a lot of havoc. I will say when the 40%, the original 10 was manageable, then there was a 40% tariff put on Brazilian coffee. Prices went from the high twos, back up to where we are today in the fours. I would say it's probably reasonable to assume now that tariff is gone, once the market starts to trust, if they ever, if they do, we probably are heading back to where we started pre-tariff announcement. Seasonality probably isn't going to let that happen right away. I do think that. I don't think it's going to be next week. I think we probably go up and retest highs before we get any type of selling coming in, and any type of comfort level, because everybody's still on their toes waiting. What's the next surprise? And you can't get comfortable. Trust me.
Not in 2025.
No, I mean, we've been left holding the bag a couple of times on. We plan things out. We do all of our research. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I know what probably is most likely to happen. As we put on our trade, and then literally 30 minutes later or the next day, it all just everything that we thought was the case unwinds, and we're looking at the exact opposite scenario. And I know business owners, producers, everybody's dealing with the same thing, and it's tough. It's tough. I will also mention this for coffee. The relationship between coffee and the Brazilian real has been highly correlated. So a lot of the rally that we saw here in the last year or so has been simple. I mean, again, I'm not saying this is the only reason coffee's rallying, but the strength in the real has really allowed coffee to move higher than maybe it wouldn't have otherwise. Like, when it comes to commodities, currency fluctuations matter dramatically. Sometimes we forget that because we're so focused on supply and demand and this and that, but currencies are a really, really big factor. And I think the higher real has allowed coffee to get up to these levels. And I'll also mention the real is up against some really good resistance. So there's a trend line that dates back, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years, even longer than that. And we're at a 200-week moving average. These aren't guarantees that the real is going to roll over and start heading the other way, but the odds are pretty good that it does. And if that happens, instead of the currency market being a tailwind for coffee, it's going to be a headwind. So it's something to keep an eye on.
And is your Substack the place where people can find that information out?
Yes. So we are kind of we don't only focus on coffee or only focus on one particular market. We're kind of looking at all the things. So some people get turned off because they get overwhelmed. Yeah, because they're seeing, well, this post is about stocks. I just want to know about grains, but
right.
we hit on every topic eventually, and we only charge $25. So it's not going to break your bank. Awesome. And you'll have access to analysis. Some of it you may not be interested in, but some of it might really genuinely help you, and hopefully help you more than the $25 or $50 that you pay to get access. So.
Yeah, and I watched a video that you posted on your YouTube channel a couple of days ago, so I'll also make sure that there's links to that. Well, the one thing that I have learned about this is that this is a language that you have to learn in layers, and I really felt quite dumb in many of the conversations that we've had, not because of you at all, but because I thought that everybody else understood this stuff instead of me. And I just came to realize, like, it's a whole different language. It's as though you're learning a brand new language, and you've got to be patient and you've got to have repeated exposure to it. I wouldn't want anyone to see the conversations I have with ChatGPT and the amount of times I ask it to repeat, no, can you explain, like I'm like 2 years old, what a put option is and why currency matters. It's difficult.
It's a lot.
I have a specific question that people keep asking me about these forces and these markets. Why when there's something that affects the cash market, why sometimes does it affect the futures market and other times it doesn't? I'll give you an example if you want one. So, for example, if we hear that that there's something going on in Brazil. Let's say Vietnam. You and I were talking about this before we got on. About 3 or 4 days ago, there were these huge floods that happened in Vietnam, and they had only picked 15% of the crop. Shout out to Felipe for sending me the videos about this. And it sounds like it's going to be pretty devastating for the crop of Robusta in Vietnam. Now, I anticipate that will impact the Arabica market as well, because people who found Arabica was too expensive were secretly going and buying Robusta, and now they're going to have to come back to the Arabica market because Vietnam is the number one producer of Robusta in the world. So if that stuff like that has happened throughout this year and it did not impact the futures market, or the futures market did something completely different to what you thought it might do, why does that happen?
Well, a lot of times, and I've experienced this myself this year, sometimes this kind of information is priced in advance. So I'm not I don't know enough about that flooding to know. But let's say people close to the source know what's going on, and they leak it to whoever, maybe even big players, maybe not. And so sometimes that kind of stuff is already built in by the time we hear it, especially if we're talking about information coming from countries that are maybe not they're not on, well, I don't want to say they're not on X, but maybe the information flow comes out a little slower. Yeah. So I can't speak to that specifically, but I can say there's been times where I look at a market and I'm like, what is going on?
Okay.
And then the next day I hear it and I'm like, okay, that's what happened. But somebody knew before we knew because they're already reacting. So that's some of it. Some of it is, like, as you mentioned, there's really, on the future side of things, there's really not enough volume in Robusta coffee for anybody to do anything with. So they go to, so that's not really going to, it will eventually if it's a global supply issue, but I'm not sure. Maybe on a percentage basis, it wasn't enough of a scare tactic. And plus, I'll be 100% honest, there's so many moving pieces that probably got lost in the sauce because it sounds like it was right around the same time of the tariff fiasco and all that kind of stuff. So there's just so many things going on. Maybe it did react, but so maybe had that not happened, maybe coffee would have been down on the on the lowest, down 40, not 20. We don't know, but. it's markets are emotional, and I'll just add one more thing. I have found it to be almost impossible to predict what a market's going to do based on fundamental news, because of the reasons I just mentioned, but also because like markets are forward looking. So if somebody out there is anticipating something, it's already priced in, and not just one person, but generally the markets are pricing in something before it happens. So why this is important is if you take a market like coffee or crude oil in 2008 or natural gas in 2022, there was zero fundamental reasons to go short crude oil in 2008 or natural gas in 2022. All the news was bullish. Nobody thought either of those prices could ever go lower. In crude oil, we were talking about we were running out of oil, and this was the beginning of the end. And as it turns out, when the fundamentals are the most bullish is when the market peaks out, and we don't really generally start learning about the bearish fundamentals until prices are 20, 30, 40% lower. So it's a really delayed reaction.
Right.
The fundamentals are kind of delayed versus the price action. And I'll mention one other thing in coffee. The market knows this. Like if you look at coffee futures, we're looking at the front month, right? You're looking at December's going off the board. March is now the front month. March is trading in the high threes. I think it probably gets up to 4, maybe a little above. December seems to be maybe going off the board somewhere around 4. But if you look at the December of 2026, it's around 320. If you look at December of 2027, it's under 3. So the futures markets, they're pricing in catastrophic pricing today because of supply issues and all the things going on. But if you look down the chain, the market actually is expecting coffee to be below $3 or at least below $3 in the next couple of years.
And that could all change based on whatever happens.
Sure.
And the more news that they get in, these prices are going to shift and change. But that's okay.
Yes.
Are the markets rational?
No. In the long run, yes. In the short run, no. And it's because markets it's humans. Like we're buying and selling because of our emotions, which is not why you should ever buy and sell, but that's what we do. And things get out of hand. And markets they're not rational in the short run, and they're not really fair either. When we first talked in 2018 or whenever that was, I remember you asking me, why can't we just set a floor in coffee?
Yeah.
Why can't it just be like a minimum price so that farmers always know they can make this amount of money?
At least this much.
And I'm going to mention in the US, we've kind of done something similar to that. It's not as simple as that, but we've done that in corn. And the unintended consequences have been really catastrophic for society. So I'll name a few of those. Well, let me go back to my last thought. I kind of got sidetracked. I'm going to finish this, but what I was saying is commodities aren't fair to anyone. We're either in an oversupply situation and prices are too low and farmers are getting, holding the bag and struggling, or they're too high and it's the buyers and the roasters that are suffering. There's very few times where we're just in a happy medium, which is very unfortunate. But as market participants, we have to kind of learn to try to hopefully manage it, but maybe even take advantage of these types of cycles because we know they're going to come. If you're a producer, we've only seen coffee above $3 a handful of months in your lifetimes. No reason to expect them to stay up here forever.
Yeah.
Maybe they
will.
We've
got a lot of that happening. They're waiting, right? A lot of farmers are sitting there saying, we're just waiting for it to drop down.
Yes. People, I see this, I saw it in the grain. I mean, I see this over and over with producers I deal with in all commodities. They have a bit of a chip on their shoulder because commodities aren't fair. There's going to be years where they're struggling, and then there's going to be years where they feel like they've hit the lottery. Yep. And they get they have emotions just like anyone else. They get greedy when things are going well, and when things are going poorly, they get overly emotional, and it's the opposite. So I'll just go back to my corn example in the U.S. The United States hasn't put a floor on corn, but what they do is they set a particular price. If corn is below this particular price, we're going to send checks to farmers.
Subsidies.
They subsidize. And it's kind of behind the scenes, so not everybody's probably even aware of it. And then they also offer things like in the US, you could really grow anything you want, correct? But most farmers are growing the same couple of crops because there are so many subsidies. Most farmers are growing corn because the government subsidizes the prices, they subsidize the insurance. They,
Oh, wow.
for these reasons, farmers plant as much corn as they can. That's really their goal. Plant as much. We have people plowing into their parking lots. Like they decided, we don't need this much parking. We'll just plant corn here because they know it. They're going to get something out of it. And then they've also kind of fallen into this trap because the government subsidizes. They're not managing their risk. What it's led to is, number one, a mass oversupply of corn. We just, more than we know what to do with, which is the problem. So it keeps prices perpetually low. So while these subsidies are created for kind of a handout because we want food security and we're trying to support farmers, we know farming is a tough business and everybody wants to support farmers and it's great. But the unintended consequences is most of the time they're going to suffer from very low prices. So it actually is kind of hurting them instead of helping them because we're always oversupplied. And then the government has done a couple other things because we're oversupplied. They've started subsidizing ethanol, which is not the most efficient fuel. So, and they've also started subsidizing like seed oils and high fructose corn syrup because we have all these grains that are supplied because we're incentivizing that with our programs. Now we're killing everybody with a poor diet. So it's really been catastrophic, to be fair.
It sounds like there's not just the primary effects, you've got the secondary and tertiary effects that end up happening from that. Okay, wow.
Right. And I don't see any winners. So I keep looking and I don't really see the winner. So I know the intention was good. We were trying to help farmers. We're trying to stabilize prices, but it actually did the opposite, in my opinion.
It really makes you look at an ecosystem very differently when things start to get skewed in one direction in the negative, and you've tilted the balance out of whack. With the intention of bringing balance into this system, you've ended up tipping it in the other way. And this is the thing that I hear farmers talk a lot about and why they're so angry about the futures market is because it sounds like this is a thing that was created for farmers. It was created to help farmers manage their risk. And now that has tilted so far away from helping farmers in their mind. Right now it's helping farmers because the prices are so high. But historically that hasn't been the case. And the one thing that they keep saying is, I can't pass this down to my children because there's so much volatility in it, they don't want it. And so this is the situation that a lot of farmers find themselves in, and they don't know quite how to use these tools. So in the next episode, folks, we're going to talk about how farmers can take advantage of these tools so that they can bring a little bit more stability and manage their risk. So join us for that. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.